You're welcome back to Thursday's Off the Ball. It is 7:30 and I'm delighted to have John Giles alongside us in studio. How are you?
Good, Nathan, thank you.
An enjoyable week of Champions League, particularly last night, the game between Juventus and Tottenham.
It wasn't very enjoyable. It wasn't very enjoyable for Tottenham. It was an enjoyable game to watch anyway.
Yeah, a lot of questions asking how did Spurs manage to lose it? How did Juventus manage to win it?
Well, I think Spurs. I think Pochettino got a bit cocky actually after the first match, Nathan, last week. Where when I was reading the papers, generally, they were talking about this is old team. This, all the old guys are playing for Juventus. Pochettino himself actually made a statement last week about Dembele, where he reminded him of Maradona and another great Ronaldinho. I mean, I think that's nonsense, to be honest, because Dembele...
Over the top in his praise.
Well, totally. I mean, Maradona is one of the best players ever in the world. Dembele, I think, played well against Juventus in a match away, and they got a very, very good result. And I think they all got carried away, the manager included, talking about Dembele in that particular way. I think, the lead up to it, having come from 2 down. And what a lot of people forgot was Juventus were actually 2 up and missed a penalty. So... there was plenty of life left in him. I think they were surprised. I think Pochettino actually underrated him. I think he got carried away. We're going to Wembley, we're playing well, we're doing this, we're doing that, the other. I think they had it in their mind, this game is won. Now, Spurs did start well, but they got a big shock. Obviously got a big shock. Everybody got a big shock with the way that Juventus responded. They're not down and out.
Did that almost increase the complacency, the way they started, in that they're going in at half-time thinking... this job is done, whereas the Italians coming out at the second half thinking actually 1 goal here and we're right back in this.
I don't think the Italians approached the game in any other way but the way it should have been approached. They knew they were in with a chance. There was only 2-2 from the first leg, and they had scored 2 goals and they missed a penalty against Spurs. So they were always in with a shout, but the general talk seemed to be from Pochettino on that this is, we're already here, we can win the Champions League. I heard all that talk in the papers. We're going to the Champions League, we're going into the last. I think they took it for granted. I think they were a bit complacent about it, and I think with the players that Juventus had, they still had a few good players, as we know, and then turned the game in the second half. But they never gave much away, despite the fact, which is typical Italian football, or Italians playing, that Spurs were on top, but they didn't score. Well, they scored 1, but they didn't finish the game off, and then they hit them with a couple of goals later on in the game. I think they took the game for granted far too much.
The way that Juventus are able to defend and the physicality they're able to bring to the game, particularly in the second half, is that something, and now it's almost become a stereotype of Italian football, is that something you always saw in Italian football, that love of defending as it's described?
People say that they love defending. I'm not sure they love defending. The other thing is when they have to defend, they defend brilliantly.
They realise its importance.
Well, it's of course, and they do it well. I think the emphasis in Italy generally, and has been for a number of years, that they're going to defend well. You very seldom see international team or club teams with Italy where they don't defend well, where they give goals away. There's very, very seldom over the years, in my time and since and before, that they gave away goals easily. And then they had, like, the great players that they had in the goalkeeper, Buffon, terrific players. We had the great centre half, Chiellini. These guys don't get old overnight. Of course they're older, and we know they're older, but they have this mentality that you saw when they block on, to get a block on, they'd get it on, and a little bit like John Terry at his best for Chelsea. And I mean, I watched the match the other night going off the Crystal Palace match from Matich goal, for example. I mean, if you look at that again and see the Crystal Palace defender coming out to block Matich, he actually is getting out of the way because he thinks, well, he's a long way out, and he won't score from that distance. And it happens. The Italians don't think that way. They think, no, if I don't block this fella's going to score. So they're brilliant at it and have been over the years, Nathan.
Is it a mentality then, or is it a structure at Italian youth level? Like, do these guys come at 18, 19 ready with a sort of defensive education that maybe players coming through in England don't have?
I think so. I think so. I think there is an emphasis on it, and has been for a long, long time, that when they defend, they're going to defend well. It's no coincidence that we watched them over the years, and everybody said, "Oh, it's going to be hard to break this crowd down." Juventus have had great defenders over the years, and obviously it's in the coaching, whatever way they do it when they're young. That if the say an Italian player, like against Crystal Palace the other night, you would just take it for granted he's going to block that ball. Whatever way he's going to block it, he's going to block it. Because what the managers tell them, we heard Trapattoni himself when he was saying all the little things matter in football. But one of the things in football is when they say the Crystal Palace player is coming out to block the shot. In his head, from the manager, from the time he was a kid, you could be saving us a goal there. No matter where the distance is, you block the shot, right? If you block the shot, there's no goal. So it might be once in a blue moon. Actually, it was the first goal Matich scored for Manchester United, that it happens. Where afterwards you say because there's three things I learned from young management. Somebody said, from a manager, if you cut out the ifs, buts and maybes, you're more than halfway there. And I've seen it myself in dressing, I've done it myself. If I'd got back, I might have done that. If I'd done this, maybe if all that carry.
So there's nothing half-hearted about the way the Italians defend.
Do it. Don't come in with any if, buts and maybes. Just do it. And then you stop the goals, because you don't know when you're stopping a goal. 9 times out of 10, Matich shot the other night would be screaming over the bar. But there'll be that one time where he hits it the way he hit it. Right? And the Italians, in my opinion, would be stop it. And that would be drilled into them from the time they were kids.
So if Spurs go into that game with a very different attitude, is that all they needed to beat that Juventus team? Like a Juventus team who've got to 2 Champions League finals in the last 3 years? Is it all attitude based from Spurs?
Well, it's attitude is your starting point, and after that, if you've got the right attitude for basic things in football, put the basics right, and then afterwards players will score good goals, they score good headers, they'll hit a terrific shot. That's all the bonus part of it. I mean, you don't have to be a great player to block the shot properly, to defend it. Right, you have to be a great player to hit a shot in the top corner of the net and all the various things that you have to do. But that is a basic thing that they get right. But I think I just felt with the build up to it with Spurs, they had a great result in Italy, and it was, we're going to Wembley, we're playing great. Pochettino saying that we're a great team, we're looking forward to it. And other players saying there's no reason why we can't win the Champions League. And it seemed to be, this tie is over, and it's never over till it's over. And Juventus hit them with 2 goals in 2 good goals in the second half, where Spurs didn't actually defend very well in that day, because the attitude in that would be, and it's very hard to get rid of it, they're not going to score. We're going to score, but they're not going to score. They're not good enough to score. They're 2-2 now, and it's going to be that. And that's what leads to the attitude on the pitch. All the great teams have an attitude the same in every match, Nathan. No matter who they're playing, top or bottom, we're going to respect the opposition. We're going to do against the opposition what we do against the best opposition in the world, and that's an attitude of mind that you have. I don't think Spurs had that attitude of mind the other night.
Looking then at one of the other big games over the last week, and Chelsea's approach to Manchester City, and Conte, coming from that Italian background, is taking a lot of criticism for the way Chelsea set up. Was that, in his mind, that sort of Italian way, how he wanted Chelsea to play against City, where we have our structure, we concentrate, okay, they'll have the ball, but if we do everything right, we can steal a win here?
Yeah. Well, that's the way he approached it. Now, it didn't work out that way, but and he got a lot of criticism for it, for the way in which they played. But they did only lose by 1 goal. And you know the response can be, and I know it's all ifs, buts and baby, but if they don't score and he gets a no-score draw, he'd be a genius.
It's a masterclass.
A masterclass in defending. And they did defend very well, because City didn't get many chances. But I thought, I'm a Conte fan. I think he was very harshly treated. I think the lads on the television were very harsh on him, Neville in particular, and Redknapp. When Redknapp said it was a crime in football. Neville said he was disgusted by the way in which they played, and he actually said, the board won't be too happy about this. Well, you have to go back on the history of this situation. The board, in many ways, would be responsible for the way Conte approached the game, right? Because here's a man who did a brilliant job last year, as we all know. Before he knows where he is, Matich has been sold, right? There's players there I've written down that Giroud, Drinkwater, Berkeley, Bakayoko. I'd say he had no say whatsoever in those players. And I think if he had got the players that he wanted, and he should have had been in the charge of the situation, he wouldn't have approached the game in the way that he approached it. From last year when they won there, and there was a lot they talked about last year when he did it, Conte was playing and Matich was playing. Two terrific. They weren't playing the other day.
I
They had
couldn't
drink
understand
water.
that. I couldn't understand how they were highlighting, here's how Chelsea beat Manchester City last year with the press, when, as you say, arguably the two most important players.
Playing. No, I didn't. I see. I was watching it in a pub, so I didn't hear everything that they were saying, but I assumed that's what they were saying. And I'm thinking to myself, well, Conte is not playing, and Matich is not playing. These were two of the main reasons that they won last year. And the main reason, well, Conte was ill, as we know, but the main reason Matich wasn't there is because they sold him. And Neville is going on about, the directors won't be too happy the way they played. But the directors were responsible for selling the player. They were responsible for buying Giroud and Drinkwater and Barkley and Bakayoko that Conte wouldn't have wanted, wouldn't have had any say in. So I thought that was very unfair on Conte. Now, it was a bad performance, but it was only by the one goal in it. But he didn't, I wouldn't have played the lad up front.
Eden Hazard.
No, I mean, I wouldn't agree with that. Anyway, but you have to go back on the history of why has he done what he's done. Like last year, he didn't sit back like that because he had Conte and he had Matich and he Costa playing with Costa. He got rid of himself, but he had a different team. But I think it was very harsh on him that Redknapp is saying this is a crime against football. Actually, my take on it, the crime against football was the way the directors have treated him all year, from a fellow that has done a brilliant job for them, actually forcing him out, in my opinion, and he's taken the brunt of it.
So is your sense then that actually Conte would look at the team with Matich and Kante in it midfield and think, these are smart, intelligent footballers, I can trust my front three to press high because I know no matter what happens, these two are going to cover all the ground. Where actually he's looking at the team the last day going, I can't leave any space.
Drinkwater didn't even want in the team. You know what I mean? There's players there he didn't want. Well, I'm not saying he didn't want, but he wouldn't have been in charge of it. Whereas last year, like, a manager can only play with what he has.
Yeah.
And if he'd had Kante and Matich playing in that match the other day, I think it would have been a different approach altogether. So that's why I'm going back on it. You can't take it out in isolation that Kante was dreadful and his tactics were terrible and he was disgusting, according to Neville. He was disgusted by the performance, and the other fella calling it a crime on football. Go back on it a bit and see why was it a crime. And my take was that the directors committed the crime on football, because instead of embracing Conte when he did what he did and say you've done a great job, absolutely, which he did last year. Now what do you want to do now? Instead, Matich out, gone. And it was well known, it's in the public domain, that the manager didn't want Matich to go. So then Bakayoko comes in. So what the directors are saying, well, we're making the decision, Matich is out, and there's Bakayoko for you. And he said, I don't want Bakayoko, I want Matich. So that's the crime, in my opinion, on football. And that wasn't addressed in any way whatsoever. I mean, Neville actually said, the directors won't like this today. No. Well, Conte wouldn't have liked Matich being sold and players being given to him that he didn't want as well.
And both are probably a good insight into how Chelsea have failed this season.
Oh, totally. Well, my opinion is the crime was
committed last summer.
And it wasn't the directors, actually. Abramovich is the boss. And he would make the decisions. The board and there's a girl director of football not now. They'd be only front people. He makes the decisions. So instead of Conte committing a crime in football, I'd go back and say Abramovich.
Yeah, I think the feeling was that, much like with Petr Cech, that Matich had a close relationship with Abramovich, and almost his reward was that they would allow him to go to one of their rivals if he was going to leave the club.
Who, Matich?
Matich.
Yeah, but he doesn't have to. But it doesn't make sense.
Yeah,
Abramovich is a Chelsea man. He's an owner of Chelsea. He wants the best team on the pitch. Right, Matich is one of the best players last year. Conte doesn't want him to go. In my opinion, what they should say to Conte, look, you've done a great job. Now, who do you want?
Yeah.
What do you want to do? It hasn't been like that.
Get better.
And I think there's been an assault on him in the press. I think there's some leaking going from the top people at Chelsea. A couple of weeks ago, it was no coincidence. The Sun and the Mail in particular had it in the paper. Players are not happy with the training. Players are not this and players are not that. That's too much of a coincidence. And I think there's a battle going on there between Conte, them trying to get him out, and him staying.
Yeah,
and I think they're saying right. I honestly think they're trying to force him out, and he's saying, "Well, I'm not going to go. I'm going to stay here until you sack me."
Yeah, which the way it's looking will come this summer. Stay with us, John. 53106 is the text number. Plenty more to get through. We're going to take a very quick break.
Off the ball. This is News Talk.
You're very welcome back to Thursdays Off the Ball. John Giles is alongside me in studio. Just before we leave Chelsea, we're getting quite a few messages in about it, but Eden Hazard, and you touched on his role playing in the centre, and he said after the game, when you leave the pitch you have the impression that you've ran a lot but you haven't played a game of football. That's a pity. We could have played for 3 hours and I still wouldn't touch a ball. And again, maybe it feeds into Conte's position and the issues within the dressing room, but one of the reasons maybe that Redknapp and Neville were annoyed was that this was the reigning Premier League champions taking on the current league leaders, and that maybe you would just automatically, like, did you ever play in games whereby you knew you were coming up against opposition that were technically superior, where you basically had to suck it up, that you went with a game plan that you weren't quite happy about, but maybe it was in the best interest of the
personally,
team?
Not really, Nathan, no. And I don't quite go with that either. You see, the Hazard made the statements afterwards, and again, I think this is lots of things leaking to the press. I don't agree with what he did. I must be honest now, I wouldn't have played Hazard where he was, but that's what he believed to be the right thing to do, and I think the response to it was Conte is responsible for all of this, and I think he was unfairly treated in that way, and also, you see, once spirit in the dressing room is very fragile. Very fragile. And all the best clubs, in my opinion, and I've been involved with a very good club, you believe that the manager is in charge. He's the boss, and he's going to be there next year, and he's going to be there forever. You have to believe that to say, right, we're all in it together. When Matich's situation happened with Chelsea, the players knew, right, that that wasn't the manager's decision. The manager is immediately undermined with that. And the spirit, this fragile spirit that there collapses. And I think that's what's happened to Chelsea, and it got worse as the time went on with the players that were imposed on the manager. The players know this fella's not in charge anymore. You know, he was the boss, but he's not the boss anymore. And Hazard wouldn't have enjoyed the match on Saturday because he didn't play well. And most players, I was a player myself, always see it from their own point of view. You know what I mean? Hazard would be saying, "Well, I didn't get a kick, I didn't play well in this particular
because I wasn't given the ball.
I wasn't given the ball. You know, quite rightly, but." Maybe last year, well, I think last year wouldn't have happened anyway, but at certain times last year, he wouldn't have come out with that. The manager would have said, look, this is the way I played it, and he'd say, okay, I'll go along with it, because that's the way the club is. But once it gets to a certain stage, then you get anarchy in a team. If you look, now I'm just changing, so look at Arsenal, for example. Total anarchy, right? And again, it wasn't addressed in a certain way, and it has been, and it's been in the public domain, that in the last few months, they've employed 3 new directors. One is a head of recruitment, not a director of football, because last year Wenger was said if the
director of football, I'm out of here.
I'm out. He's not out. He's actually staying on, but he's not in charge of the situation and hasn't been. He didn't get Mkhitaryan, right? Ozil has got the wages he's got because of the Sanchez situation. Aubameyang, right? No way did Wenger sign him, and he's to take the responsibility for that. He's a dead duck, but he has to take the responsibility for it. But in recent times, in all the pundits and the people on the I haven't seen any of them mention that Arsenal, he wasn't doing a good job anyway. There's no doubt with Wenger. But I haven't heard anybody say, but hang on a minute, he's not in charge of it anymore. And that's where you get the anarchy. You see, over the weekend, it was a Chiellini who was saying, well, he's got to take some responsibility.
Yeah.
They shouldn't be allowed to talk like that. You know, like when Wenger was at his best and Conte was on Ferguson. Imagine if Ferguson, if one of the players said, well, the manager has to take responsibility for it. You know?
Yeah, he'd be sitting out a few games.
Yeah. They wouldn't be there. So that's the way it happens. It's fragile. Anarchy, it's total anarchy at Arsenal.
Players clearly sense that, because if Eden Hazard had come out this time last year and made that sort of comment, we'd be describing him as a brat. And look at what Antonio Conte's made you, one of the best footballers in the league. Whereas now, suddenly you side him with him a bit more.
He knows he's not in charge. Wenger, the players know Arsenal. He's just not in charge. He wasn't doing a very good.
There's no responsibility then. There's no responsibility. You look at those Arsenal players and you wonder.
Chiellini came out the way. Now, Chiellini, do you remember the first goal against Brighton? He gave the bad ball away. But he's saying, well, the manager has to take responsibility. Well, it gives them players license to do things like that. That's where you get the anarchy. And that's when I go back to the Conte situation. Once the Matich thing starts, that's the beginning of the end, actually, for the manager. In Wenger's case, there was quite a few things happened that led to what's happening now, particularly bringing Mkhitaryan in, Aubameyang in, one or two others in. That there's no way that Wenger brought that, and the players know that.
So you're saying whether Koscielny is right or wrong, and there's a personal responsibility for his mistakes, but even if he's right or wrong about Wenger getting his tactics spot on and the players are frustrated, the second you're starting to say that in public, the manager is dead and buried.
And worse than that, the bad performance comes along with it, Nathan. Right, that was a poor performance against Brighton, right? But the lead up to it, that didn't happen by accident. This was all the signings they made over the period of time. The players know the manager's no longer in charge. I can afford to give him a bit of stick in the paper now. I don't have to do my job properly and all the various things that go with it. That's what anarchy is all about.
Yeah.
And that happens once it's very fragile. Once the manager says or does certain things, or certain things done, the players know he's no longer in charge. And when you're the player, you have to believe that the manager's in charge of everything. He is the boss.
If you're doubting the manager, are you doubting yourself almost?
You're doubting the spirit of the team, because it's very fragile. That everybody working together. You know what I mean? I experienced it because when I was at Leeds, we won the league, and then Brian Clough came in. 44 days, we were gone. We got together. We got to the European Cup final that year because we got together for those big matches. But the spirit that we had for 10 years was gone, totally wiped out. Straight away. It's very, very fragile because the manager has to be in charge. Because all players, I found my experience with football, if it's Koscielny, a centre half, and we had Big Jack would want 10 players running back in his position. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And the manager has to say, no, we're not getting 10 players back. You have to do your job and get on with your job. And if you take the manager away from that, then the centre forward is saying, like Hazard said, he had a case. I hate playing that position. I never even got a ball, right? Now, he'd been asked to play in that position last year, if he had been asked to play in last year and didn't play well, he wouldn't be saying that.
Yeah.
He said, okay, boss, it'll be okay. That's the way it works. And the only thing I'm complaining about is the likes of Redknapp and Neville in particular are slamming Conte without looking at the big picture. And the Wenger situation at Arsenal. Now he drew a lot of that on himself because I think he managed the situation very badly in the summer with Sanchez and Noah was ill. I think they should have got them out, and it hung on, and it actually gave the board a situation where, look, we have to make a change here. And the change it made is 3 people coming in, and that led to Ozil getting the big contract to stay. Bobby Young being brought in, who's had Wenger would never have signed him in a million years with his record of bad behaviour in that. And you got Mkhitaryan coming in. There's not exactly a warrior, either. So Wenger now is in charge of this lot that he hasn't been responsible for bringing in, and there's totally anarchy at Arsenal.
Can I ask you briefly, just before we go, about Ireland, because the squad was named for the game against Turkey, and you mentioned Jack Charlton there, and I think back to when Charlton left and after we failed to qualify for the World Cup in '98, Mick McCarthy had several friendlies on both occasions where he blooded a lot of new players. Now the results weren't great, but ultimately they were the players that formed the backbone of the squad that qualified in 2002. Do we need to give Martin O'Neill some breathing space over the next 6 to 9 months?
Definitely. Well, he's got a few friendly matches now, and this is the only way you find out about players is when they actually play, Nathan. And this is a perfect example now. There's obviously new blood coming in. Hopefully it'll work out well and we get some good players, but you don't know till you play them. But I think it is an ideal opportunity for the manager to do that now, because you look at a player playing for a club, Nathan, and you think, well, he can do that. But when you're playing for him, he's not as good as I thought he was. And sometimes they're better than you think they are until you see them. And this is an ideal opportunity, and hopefully, fingers crossed, that these players will come and develop and become real international players for the country.
Yeah, guys like Alan Brown, Shawnee Maguire, Preston.
Yeah, I don't know any of them, to be honest, Nathan, so I'm looking forward to seeing them. But hopefully, fingers crossed, that these lads will come through and say, that's brilliant, that's a good set of lads coming through. But they have to be given the opportunity, and I think they will be given that, because there'll be a lot of friendly matches coming up. Yeah,
very good. John, great to have you in the studio. Thanks as always. We'll talk to you next week.
Hey, hope you enjoyed that latest offering from Off the Ball. If you want to subscribe, and you should, check out just up here. All our latest stuff is just down here. Generally, knock yourself out.